Welcome to Học tiếng Anh với Joseph, where we build vocabulary and practice pronunciation. Continue with The Cat in the Box, story number 29 out of 100. Today we talk about the relationship between electricity and chemistry, investigated by mainly Humphrey Davy in this story. I'm going to tell you the story, my own story, later on in the video, at the end of the video. It's pretty funny. What I wrote there is potassium equal kalium and sodium equal natrium. I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end of the video. Electrifying science. Soon after Alexander Volta invented the electric pile or battery, the British chemist Humphrey Davy investigated the relationship between electricity and chemistry. This is a classic example of the interplay between science and technology. Scientific investigation led to the invention of the battery, which provided a source of electric current that was then used in further scientific investigations. That in turn would lead to new technologies and so on. As has often proved to be the case, the availability of a new tool meant that a large number of similar experiments could be carried out to probe the nature of material world. Davy started out from the correct deduction that the electricity produced by the voltaic pile was a result of chemical interactions going on in the pile. So he turned things around by looking at what chemical reactions were stimulated when an electric current was passed through different substances. His key discovery was that in many cases, the effect of the current is to break a compound down to its component parts, a process now known as electrolysis. This led to the discovery of new elements, in particular metals. Davy began studying voltaic reaction in 1800 when he was based in Bristol, and soon confirmed the link between chemistry and electricity by passing an electric current through water. A wire connected to the positive end of the battery, later known as the anode, was dipped into one end of a tank of water, while a wire connected to the negative end of the battery, later known as the cathode, was dipped in the other end of the tank so that an electric current flowed through the water. The effect of the current was to produce bubbles of oxygen at the anode and bubbles of hydrogen at the cathode. And of course, Davy already knew that oxygen gas and hydrogen gas combined to make water. The water had been decomposed by electricity into its constituent parts. Davy's investigation of this phenomenon had to be put on hold because in 1801 he moved to a new post at the Royal Institution, itself new, in London, and in 1802 he became professor of chemistry there. His duties kept him busy on other projects for a time, but in 1806 he carried out a series of 108 experiments involving electrolysis. The basic experimental setup was improved by attaching the two wires, anode and cathode, to metal plates or rods dipped into the substance being studied. Davy presented the results of his work in a lecture to the Royal Society later that year, and went on in 1807 to electrolyze molten salts. He produced potassium from caustic potash, now known as potassium hydroxide, and sodium from caustic soda, sodium hydroxide. The experiment itself was very simple. Potash is found in the ashes of burnt plants, which Davy collected in a small crucible. When an electric current was passed through the ashes in the same way as in the electrolysis of water, the potash got hot enough to melt and pure potassium collected around the cathode. These two metals have not been previously differentiated by chemists, but Davy showed that in spite of their similarities, there are different elements. All this work was so important that Davy was awarded a French prize of 3,000 francs for the year's best work on galvanic electricity, even though Britain and France were at war. In further experiments, really the same experiment repeated with different substances, Davy isolated magnesium, calcium, strontium, and barium. In a slight deviation from this work, in 1809, he made or discovered another use for electricity when he took the two wires from the batteries and connected them to the opposite ends of a strip of charcoal. The electric current passing through the charcoal heated it until it glowed. Davy had invented the electric light in the form of an arc lamp. This was essentially the end of his experimental research on electricity, although he did many other things, including isolating and naming the gas chlorine. In 1812, his achievements were marked by a high honor. He was knighted. This has more than personal significance and is a landmark in history of science. Davy was the first person in Britain to be knighted for his scientific work. Isaac Newton got his knighthood for political reasons, which indicates the increasing importance of science in early 19th century society. For the vocabulary section today, we have quite a few words, so let's start. Electrifying. Electrify is a verb. Electrifying. Deduction. The verb is deduce. Deduction is different from induction or induce. Stimulate. Stimulated. Stimulating. Stimulate. Electrolysis. Electrolysis. Anode and cathode. Anode, cathode. Decomposition. Decomposing. Decompose. Bodies decompose. Leaves decompose after the winter. Potassium or kalium, sodium or natrium. I'll go back to this later. Crucible. Differentiate, differentiation. Differentiate, differentiate. So there are 5 sounds. Okay? Differentiate. Go quickly like that. Differentiation. Differentiation. That's 6. Galvanic electricity. And he was knighted, or somebody or someone being knighted means the queen gives that honor so that later on that person is going to be consequently known and addressed as Sir, like Sir John Lennon, and so on. Okay. Now the story with potassium and sodium is that when I first came here, the very first day attending school, I was handed a quiz. And in the quiz, in the chemistry class, and in the quiz, you have to basically name these elements from its symbol. So I only know K is like potassium and Na is natrium, so I wrote it down like that. And the way we marked the paper, the quiz, was that we just passed our sheet to a friend in front or behind, I forgot, I think behind. And then that person will mark the paper according to the correct answer written on the blackboard. And when I look at the result, I was astonished because K is not gallium and Na is not natrium. And then so I put up my hand and say, "Sir," the teacher was actually a female. Her name was Miss Minchos. This story has happened so long ago, but I couldn't forget. So everybody looked at me. "Sir," to a female teacher? Never heard of it. In any case, she came down and she looked at my paper and said, "Okay, this is Latin." So it was correct. So that's my memory. I wish that when we learn English, we all have striking examples to remember of all the terms that we encounter. It's not possible, but the more the better. So pay attention to things around you, notice them, and be curious enough to say, "Okay, what is it called in English?" And that's how we all learn, by repetition, so that our brain can absorb all those information, and we'll use it when the time comes. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And as usual, I'll see you in the next story. Bye for now.